You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 509, our first impressions of Outlaws, Star Wars Outlaws, the latest Star Wars video game being produced and created by Ubisoft. And this was a weird day to announce the cinematic trailer on Sunday, a little bit more on that later, and then followed by Ubisoft Forward, where we got the full gameplay. It was like 10 minutes of gameplay. So what we're going to do tonight is kind of talk through a little bit about the trailer, since it was cinematic. Maybe not a lot to really talk about there, but more importantly, we're going to jump into all the details of the gameplay and what you guys can expect. And to do that, I've got with me Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. You are not Kyle Katarn. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm definitely not Kyle Katarn, but man, I'm doing fantastic. And actually, for those listening, our live stream is already kind of jumping tonight. We got lots of people out in the chat: Risk, Rod, Gary, Jonathan, Steph, Reader Reborn, Rob, Sky, Dale. Man, we're doing shout-outs before being prompted for shout-outs. That's how excited I am about this.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a big deal. Like, this is for a number of reasons, and all that, which we'll dive into here in just a little bit. But before we get started, I know you want to say thanks to a few folks here.
Absolutely, yes. We have a new subscriber on the Patreon. Z joined the This Is the Way tier, so welcome, Z. We hope you're enjoying the content just in the last day or so. And, of course, all of our fantastic members that we have, thank you so much, especially our now part of the tribe. Rob, Mike, Lauren Dante, Risk, Justin Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh C, Jacob, Steve, Reader Reborn, and of course the wonderful Delusions of Grandeur members, Rod, CJ, and Alex. Alex, I apologize. I did not say your name last week. I said a duplicate name, so I apologize for that. But Alex, there you go. I'm even paying it forward for you, buddy. Anyway, yeah, thank you to everyone. If you are curious about Patreon, if you're listening to this, cantinacast.com/Patreon. You can check out all of our new memberships. Actually, Patreon is kind of doing a visual refresh right now. Mm-hmm. So you'll see some graphics and things like that be more front and center. It's a little more modern, if you will. But lots of great stuff out there. You can check our Patreon exclusives that we've been doing. We try to do those every week. Albert and Lauren have done some in the past as well. So lots of great stuff out there. More to come tonight after this show at 10 p.m. Central. Of course, we have the Tatooine Trading Post, where we get to peddle our wares for the week. So that's pretty exciting. We haven't done one for a while. And I've got a desk full of stuff in front of me, and prioritizing what I was going to bring up tonight. I have them like in thresholds here. Okay, these are definite ones. These are the ones if we need more filler, and then these are the ones if we get desperate, like we've blitzed through everything. That's never the case because we talk so much, but I've actually got it all organized here. So it's kind of crazy. I've got like the next month all planned out.
Wow. Yeah. And to be clear, we don't do filler. We're like Dave Filoni. Nothing is ever filler. We are purposeful, and everything will come back around at some point. But yeah, I'm excited about that too, because I've got a few things that have come in here in the recent 2-3 weeks since we've done that. So it has been accumulating.
You got stories behind some of yours too.
Oh, I told the one story on the last Tatooine Trading Post. Yeah, I did tell that story. It was only for Patreons though. Yeah. And but I've got a follow-up to that story. So look forward to that here at 10 p.m. Central. So if
you like story time with Albert, you want to make sure that you join. Anyway, if you're listening to this, thank you for downloading the episode. If you're curious about coming out to the live stream, cantinacast.com/YouTube. You can see our smiling faces. You can join all the wonderful people we mentioned earlier in the chat. They're having a great time. They're saying hi to everybody. It's like family coming home, and you haven't seen anybody for a whole 3 days, and you're just as excited to see them today as you were 3 days ago. So
I don't know if that's how family works, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
That's how our family works, Albert.
Oh, yeah, well, that's exactly right.
Yeah. And how else are you going to see me in this awesome Cantina Cast baseball jersey?
So where did you get that from? I'm curious.
Oh, I've said it before on the show. I can't remember the name of the company now. But yeah, I ordered it online, just one of those places that do it, and it's got, wrong shoulder.
It's got the logo there, yeah.
Yeah, I got the logo on the arm. Sorry for the audio, you're going to have to correct there. But yeah, it's got the Cantina Cast. You can do custom name and number and all that good stuff. So it's got my name on the back. Yeah. And one of my favorite numbers was 17. So.
But you didn't do the shoes though, right? You were thinking about it.
That's a whole nother story. I was trying to do custom shoes, and Vans gave me such a hard time about owning the logo. I'm like, you're kidding me, right? How am I going to show you proof that we did this logo?
Yeah. exactly.
But anyway, but if anybody's curious, hit me up over on Discord, cantinacast.com/Discord, especially if you're a Patreon member. And I will send you the information of where I got it. But yeah, this isn't one we can offer like on TeePublic or anything like that.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, let's get into our first impressions of Star Wars Outlaws. And so let's start with Sunday, because I'm sitting there enjoying my Sunday afternoon, like any other weekend, and out of nowhere, I get a text from Alex, of all people, and he's like, "Hey, the new Star Wars Outlaws trailer's playing." And I'm thinking, he must be thinking about it. I'm thinking, like, this is an old game? What is he talking about? Why? And then so he's like, no, the new one. So I go out to Twitter, and sure enough, it's already ablaze, right? Everything's on fire. Everybody's talking about it. But I immediately posted something, and it got a lot of traction. It was just weird that they were announcing anything on the weekends, right? I mean, that's just not typical time that you would release news-worthy type stuff, because generally people are doing other things on the weekend. They're not really following Star Wars. And it turns out it all makes sense now in some ways, right? Because they had Ubisoft Forward, which was the day after. Why they didn't release that trailer that Monday, who knows? Either way, it generated a ton of buzz. A lot of people were talking about that trailer. I don't know if you want to get into the specifics of the trailer, but just kind of what were your first impressions in watching it? I think I sent it to you. Was it that same night I think I sent it to you?
I saw it within about the first 20 minutes. Because
so it had to been.
I think I'd messaged you. I was like, hey, did you see it? I can't remember exactly how that went down. But yeah, it was right within that first half hour of it.
Yeah.
Because I caught it off guard. I was like, why are they doing this on a Sunday just out of the middle of nowhere? It makes no sense. And you did a great job of explaining this the other day on the way station of that they eat, or what is it? E3 isn't a thing anymore, where there used to be the Electronics Expo and used to have all sorts of announcements and things like that. It's basically the gaming and electronic and computing industry's version of San Diego Comic-Con, if you will, isn't really a thing anymore out in Vegas. So now each one of them kind of holds their own. Blizzard, Activision does their own, and this is Ubisoft's. And I kind of like you said, I thought this would have just been part of their presentation. So them getting ahead of it. And what I liked about this is not only did they give you the trailer, but then they also had a walkthrough that came the day after, as well as a developer kind of guided walkthrough where they gave you a little bit of color commentary as to what was going on, things behind it. But overall, I mean, one, this is beautiful. I mean, this is an actual beautiful game. I mean, these are all cinematics, so of course it looks beautiful. The mouth movements maybe a little bit weird. That part didn't work out. But man, just from a bringing you in and feeling like Star Wars and feeling like this is something that you might be interested in and giving a really great presentation, the music, the visuals, the ships, all of that good stuff. It really just grabs you right away. And so I think that's the part that's always really encouraging is you've got to make that first impression with these types of things is so important. And again, and then you've got to really deliver on it after the fact. But being able to do this and really having a new character front and center, you have familiar things going on around you. The setting is familiar, but to be able to give us truly this outlaw type of game of where you are in the underworld of sorts and you're just trying to make your way. It's really not underworld. It's really just kind of a smuggler. And even though they use the word outlaw, it's really just kind of the smuggler scoundrel type of role and what it means to just kind of making your way through the galaxy. What does that actually look like? What are the ramifications? So I love some of the ideas and the concepts behind it. And we'll talk a little bit about that tonight, how that plays out, and then maybe how we think how well that might work, some of the challenges they might have with some of that too. But yeah, first impressions with these cinematics, really, really great way of setting the story up, I thought.
Yeah, and you're right. Like they did a good job. I mean, you've got to put your best foot forward with any IP, but when Star Wars is around, you really have to get it right. We're so clued in on every single aspect, the sounds, the visuals, the tone, right? All of this stuff, some of the stuff that's just not even tangible, things that are just inherently Star Wars, you've got to get right with these games. And I think for the most part, I would say most of the games, more recent games that have come out, we're not in the era of like the 90s when things were kind of wacky and cartoony and there was a lot of freedom around this because there's a more focused, hyper-focused direction in ensuring that it stays canon, in the line of canon. All of that kind of plays into what we get. But this feels like a very polished, I mean, someone said the logo was like one of the most Star Wars-looking things we've had in a long time. And I would agree, like, even with the, the neon and the way it was kind of crackling and breaking in and out, right? I think they did a really good job on the aesthetic so far from what we've seen. The trailer felt like Star Wars. It felt there was someone else that had mentioned, can we just get video game developers just to create movies, right? I mean, it's like, how many times have we seen a cinematic and went, wow, this like blows away so many other things that we've seen on TV or even in the movies.
Right.
They just do a really good job. They get it. And that's just kind of the state of the art. We've come a long way, to be honest. It hasn't always been that way. I'll be quite frank for anybody that thinks that, we're looking at this through rose-tinted glasses. We're not. But they've done a really good job with this one in particular, and just making it feel like Star Wars, like you said.
I think one of the things that struck me, though, is that with Outlaws, this actually felt like it had the spirit of fun and adventure, kind of like Solo, a Star Wars story. And I know some people might kind of look at me funny when I say that, but the idea behind it of it just being a fun, not Jedi-centric, kind of not traditional Star Wars, if you will, from lightsabers and everything else, but kind of getting back to the people and having that, it really does bring you back into like what Solo, a Star Wars story, was trying to accomplish. Of you had just this central character that is just trying to make their way through, and what does it mean to make your way through this galactic empire era that we have here. And so I like that that's the spirit that they went after, and it's a whole lot of fun to be able to explore that, because you don't know who to trust, right, in this area.
Yeah.
You don't know, you can't trust syndicates, you can't trust the criminal underworld, you can't trust the empire not to stab you in the back, even if you're trying to help them out. And then you had this whole rebellion thing, you getting caught in the crossfire. There's just so many aspects of it that make this era so compelling, and that we continue to be able to sap things from it and get excitement. I think this is a niche that hasn't really been explored in a long time. We've kind of tried to, but not been super successful in a lot of ways. And while it's kind of a joke of, this Jalen character kind of reminds you of Kyle Katarn, it's really that Shadow of the Empire mentality of that spirit, right? That kind of comes up a little bit.
I like that.
Right. That's kind of the vibe that you get from it. And that's why it's so exciting in some ways, because it kind of fills this void of a different avenue of Star Wars storytelling within this era that we know so well.
Yep. No, I agree to all of that. In fact, some of the guys are chiming in right now on the chat. Jeff saying that he'd love it if it was in the same as good as the Solo film, and Gary says the same feel as when I played KOTOR. That's a great way. Like, there's something about the energy of this game that feels very similar to that. It's some kind of an extension. Even though, like, graphically, they're night and day difference. I mean, they're so far apart. Right. But there's just something about the feel of it all that feels very reminiscent of those particular games. So, super excited about this one. Let's just quickly talk about this. This is the first official open world Star Wars game. Open world in the sense that it's more like Grand Theft Auto 3, Assassin's Creed, number of other massive games, Ubisoft games, that they're kind of like the big player in that space. You and I don't know what your experience is with these types of games. I will tell you, I like these games a lot, but I'm like I'm terrible about staying on track with these games, because if you give me an open world, the minute I start this game, the first thing I'm telling you right now, the minute I get a chance to go explore and step away from the storyline, you'll never see me again. I may never come back to the main storyline ever. And that's why I like MMOs, because I can just kind of go do whatever I want. It's not like, I have a hard time with games like Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor, because it is so linear and I'm forced to go down a certain path. I mean, I love the games, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I don't, but this is more my style. I just tend to get myself in trouble where I'm like, I have to restart because I've gotten way off course and I've built up a bad reputation. Everybody in the galaxy's after me, right? Or whatever, the world is after me, and there's just no way to come back to it all. But that's what I enjoy. So this particular genre, though, this open world play style, is massive. And no pun intended, there are a lot of people that really like this. I'm one of those people. What about you? How do you feel about having your first kind of open world single player Star Wars realm like this?
Yeah, I'm one of those few that haven't really, maybe not the few, but this is new territory for me. I've not really played these games before. I tinkered with Grand Theft Auto way back in the day because it was such a phenomenon for a while, right? And there were so many different things you could do, especially GTA 3. But it was something that I get lost. I'm like, I don't know what it is I'm supposed to be doing. And I think that's the part that they may have some challenges with for the audience like me, who was like, okay, this looks really cool. There's story elements to it, but you really have this open-ended journey that you can take that you kind of define. And so helping new prospective players that aren't familiar with this area or this area of gaming, come into that world to be able to say, here's what that actually looks like. Here's what's possible. Here's the fun that you can have. So that this is okay. That's part of the design to allow you to do that, but also give you this element of like, there is something you can bring a story. And actually one of the game developers, I think, talked a little bit about this briefly, and I can't remember which one. I apologize. Keeping track of just names without faces and stuff is sometimes challenging for me. But basically they said that, there will be things to help prompt you of, hey, did you know about this? Hey, were you aware you could talk to this person? Did you know you could be presented with this scenario? Those kind of helpers I think are really important to put out there, that for newer people in the genre, like you will have help along the way if you want it. And for experienced players, you can turn that stuff off if you want. They didn't say that latter part, but I assume that you can, if these are like tool tips and things like that, you'll be able to turn them off, or at least maybe reduce how many you need. And over time, you probably don't need as many anyway. But I like that there's that helping mode that just gets you acclimated, gets you used to the experience, so that you can say, here's how you can enjoy this game. And there's a couple of different ways you can enjoy the game as well. So I'm excited to see exactly how they pull that part of it off, because we've just seen such a small sliver, and really they didn't tell us much about everything that we could expect to see. This was very much just like a very brief teaser of sorts for us.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And I think not to jump ahead, but at the very end of that, like you mentioned, there was the developer thing. They kind of kept hinting that July at one of the Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, I think is what they were talking about.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's going to be more revealed there at least. So maybe we'll get more additional gameplay, and we'll get into speculation around when this is. So just kind of let's get into the real, what I'm calling the tail of the tape on this one. This is scheduled for 2024. It's going to hit all the main next generation systems, so PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and then of course the PC. So they've got the pretty much covered there. They released kind of two synopses of this game, and I'll just read this one real quickly. This is the one that was off their website, the gameplay website, not the one that they released on Sunday, but it says, experience the first ever open Star Wars game set between the events of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Explore distinct planets across the galaxy, both iconic and new. Risk it all as Kves, a scoundrel seeking freedom and the means to start a new life, along with her companion Nyx. Fight, steal, and outwit your way through the galaxy's crime syndicates as you join the galaxy's most wanted. If you're willing to take the risk, the galaxy is full of opportunity. So it does feel like, from this pitch, it is, like you said, more scoundrel, thief kind of base, and not necessarily on the underground, although the crime syndicates play a large portion in this. And we saw that in the trailer. I mean, we saw tons of, well, let's just start with the I guess the elephant in the room, or the hut in the room, right? But we actually saw Jabba the Hutt in the cinematic trailer, and from the developers' conversation that happened afterwards, it sounds like we are going to get into the huts themselves. They're going to be one of the main ones. We're going to get into the Pikes, of course. They appeared predominantly in the gameplay section. But then they also introduced a couple of other ones, and I'm trying to scroll down now. Was it the Ashiga clan? Was the name of the new syndicate?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, so all of this, and I mean, I've got questions, because I think from canon, at least up until now, there were only a certain number of clans, I think, around at this point. And so introducing this one maybe adds like a 6th clan now, which is fine. I don't really have a problem with it. But you're probably closer to this than I am because of the comics and what was going on there in Crimson Reign and all that. But this does feel like it's probably after those events, correct?
Correct. Yeah, those were all after. So a lot of the Crimson Empire and leading up to that was all leading up to Empire Strikes Back. So actually, no, it was right after that, because I think Han Solo was already in Carbonite, and they're kind of trying to figure out how to go and get him. So yeah, this all lines up right in that space. So it would be interesting if something like Crimson Reign comes about. That was a pretty specific story, though. And while it was bringing the syndicates together, this seems to operate more in line with what are the syndicates doing from a day-to-day operations, and what does it mean to interact and interface with them. There could be story elements that bring you to Akira or something like that, which I think would be interesting and cool, that you're again, you kind of feel within the broader galaxy that's going on. But the way that they touted it seemed like that's not necessarily an immediate, expectation of this. And is it necessary? No, because I think you can accomplish a lot of the same things in keeping the gameplay rather focused for right now. But I think it's something of like, how many entities, how many different specific factions do you want to introduce day one and have them? Do you need 2 or 3, or do you need 5 or 6 or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. To keep things interesting. And I like, even with Jabba the Hutt, we did get Johan and Carbonite on the slab going in front of him. Again, help you establish timeline of where you're at, making sure you're grounded in what's going on. And I love the idea, and we've seen this in other games too before, where you go see a major character like a Jabba the Hutt, and you're able to pan around the room and you see Han and Carbonite on the wall. And that experience that you're kind of living in that environment, and there's nothing you could really do about that scenario.
Right.
At least not yet. But to be able to experience and kind of live and feel like you are part influencing something around these lines and things are going to happen is kind of a special feeling to be able to take place in, knowing that those events are not far away from happening.
Yeah, it's that immersion effect that we're going to get, right? And we'll talk more in just a little bit too, because there are some interesting planets that we've already seen. They've actually confirmed that, again, like I've already got my mind set up in terms of where I'm going first once I get to Tatooine, things like that. Just quickly going back to kind of what we were the tail of the tape, if you will. So again, we talked about this is probably after the Bounty Hunter series. Their tagline was "You live and die by your reputation," and we'll get into the gameplay just quickly here, but. This does, from the demo that we got, there is a very heavy influence here in the decisions you make. In fact, they went on to say that, if you burn bridges with a particular clan or syndicate of some sort, that they won't offer certain missions, right? And you've got to come back and you can rebuild that reputation. But it feels like it is going to play pretty heavily. And I think it makes sense if you're an outlaw and you're running these jobs, these different jobs for all these different syndicates, that should have an effect on you. It's always interesting to see how far this goes. The one thing that I enjoyed, just quickly, the one thing that I enjoyed that he did say that I've always had a problem with these open world systems like this when reputation plays into it, is that sometimes it feels like you have to pick, like you're having to pick between the right and wrong answer. Right. I hate that. That's that stress, the anxiety of like, I really don't want to screw this up, and am I going to be shorting myself out of a full game experience, the richest experience that I can have, that kind of thing. And I forget again which developer it was, but he said there are no wrong or right choices. So you can go through here and you can make decisions and not feel like, boy, someone's going to have a much cooler experience, or I'm going to miss out on this particular piece, right? It feels like they've done their best to try to allow you to still have autonomy and free will to make choices, but still the main narrative continues to happen. Side quests may change here and there, but the main narrative shouldn't change too drastically. So that makes me feel a little bit better. I always struggle with that most of the time.
That's important in a game like this too, because you want to make sure that your character, you are a scoundrel, you are just trying to make your way through the galaxy. You don't necessarily have allegiances in this way. So your reputation is more about how likely you are to get, better missions or better rewards or be trusted in that organization.
Yep.
But you're for hire. If there's another opportunity that comes up, you want to have that flexibility to be able to do it. And sometimes you learn something and you want to intentionally decrease your reputation with that, with that faction. And it'd be interesting to see how well this works from a grind perspective. Because usually when I hear reputation, I cringe, because you're right. Usually you just want to max it out. And sometimes you have trade-offs of, if you want this faction, then you will fall in this other faction. It's a trade-off. It's one or the other. I like that they're maybe not as linked in that kind of way. Although it would be cool if you do have warring factions that you do pick up a bit of a reputation. But it would be cool if you have ways to minimize some of that. Because again, if it rewards stealth or something like that, they don't necessarily know who did it. Even if they know the syndicate that was responsible for it, they don't necessarily need to know, who actually knocked him off with the actual job. So I like things like that. I think the other aspect of this that was really interesting is that the Empire is very present when all of this, in this wanted system, when they flashed the red wanted sign on the warning
right.
on the screen, I was like, that is cool. Like, I love it that she was walking through, and again, it was cinematics or that type of thing, but they had her, like, they wasted no time. They put the APB out there and everybody started, chasing after her. And I love this idea of the wanted system, that if you piss the Empire off too many times, they will come after you and they will make your life very difficult, because that's real in Star Wars right now, right? Even though you're a small timer, if you get big enough to be noticed, there are ramifications for it. And I like that correlation you brought up, Crimson Reign, because that's what happened basically, is that they made enough noise and they created enough chaos for the Empire where Emperor Palpatine even had to take his notice, right? And they had to do something about it. So I like those aspects where if you get big enough, the Empire will take notice, and that they're willing to stab you in the back, and this ability to, do I bribe them or not bribe them, like we saw in the cinematic there, or I guess this was in the gameplay, right? But that idea that you've got to make a choice is pretty cool, and I like that the idea that there's not a wrong or a right answer. It's about how you want to play the game. I think is really important. But this is where I get nervous too, because I'm not as familiar with this style of game of, oh man, what is it? This to me that feels stressful, because I'm like, well, no, there is a right answer. So what is it? And telling me there's not one, like, I don't know what I want to do, but that's why you kind of play the game and you experience the game. So it's kind of interesting in that way.
Yeah, I think some of the better games in this genre have what you were talking to or alluding to, where you've got a way to kind of get your bearing, right? Find your true north, which is back on that main quest line. If they provide that opportunity, then I think they're probably okay. And it does sound like they're going to be doing something in that space there. So let's talk about the characters. Cave S is the main character, played by Humberly Gonzalez from Colombia. Very beautiful woman. Thief,
Colombia or Venezuela?
Venezuela. I'm sorry. Yeah, Venezuela. You're right. Thief, scoundrel, outlaw. She called her fearless, charming, confident, tough. Charming, but we'll take your stuff. We got to see her use the word dank ferric in the gameplay. So
she's all right in our book.
Yeah, right. Already interesting that they're doing dank ferrics in there.
Have to keep a counter for that one now too. Goodness.
Yeah, yeah. She feels comfortable using a blaster, but not her first choice in situations. And I think that was pretty evident. I mean, the character seems like, well, Humberly Gonzalez sounds like she's bringing a lot of character to this. It seems like she's very charming, very quick on her feet, very witty in terms of her dialogue and the way she interacts with people. So I can see where that's probably going to be your first and primary option before a blaster. Or if you want to just go ahead and just start shooting everything, this is the beauty of these games, right? You can kind of do both if you want. There was an aspect of stealth as well that we saw from the gameplay. Kind of wasn't expecting that. I actually enjoy that quite a bit, being able to kind of sneak around and not always jump to a blaster immediately or have to talk my way out of things.
Smash and grab type of thing every single time, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, what did you? I guess just first impression. I mean, she looks like a scoundrel. She looks like a bounty hunter. It does sound like she's going to be going on a journey. It sounds like she's probably small fries at the very beginning. And I guess we should preface this by saying the overall story here, and it wasn't even it wasn't until like the developers started talking about it, but eventually she meets up with this character Jalen, which we'll talk about here in a second. And it sounds like this is the true goal of this game, is some kind of massive heist where if she can pull this one heist off, she can retire and she doesn't have to worry about, ever the Empire. It was like all this stuff from like Bad Batch and Solo was all coming just right back to me. Andor as well, right? We'll get away from this and the Empire. We'll get away from the Empire, the oppression of the Empire. And I'm just thinking, no, you won't. We've seen this too many times, but that's kind of like the overall story. So it does sound like she's going to rise to fame through the course of these actions. And then I would assume that if you're successful, you will pull off this heist. It'd be interesting to see where her character goes at that point. But first impressions, I guess, on KVS here.
Yeah, and Jeff mentioned Dr. Aphra in the chat as well. And I think that's where the correlations of this, when you think about what makes Dr. Aphra such a compelling character and so interesting, is that twinkle in her eye, that snarkiness, that edge to her a little bit too. And I think Humberly Gonzalez in the interview that she had, she captures that, and she really conveys that spirit in the interview. I think the character from what we saw has a little bit of that too, but again, a very, very small sampling. But knowing where, as an actress and the way that she wants to play the part and what she's bringing to it is very encouraging, because that just makes it take the familiar, but make it interesting and give it that swagger, right? Because that's what makes Han Solo and Dr. Aphra and Lando Calrissian so compelling and so interesting and so part of our lexicon, is that they just bring, they just bring this aura with them, and that's what makes them so much fun to go. And that's what's going to make this character, I think, so interesting to watch and so interesting to play, to see what it is that, what kind of shenanigans does she get into? How does she get out of them? What are all the tools in her utility belt to be able to figure out how she's going to get in and out of these situations, right? And I like the idea of her and the blaster have some sort of connection, right? You can grow your skills, of course, but also you modify your blaster. It goes with you, and it modifies with, during the gameplay, and it has different modes you can do. So it's very much your initial immediate tool that you keep on you. And so I like that, because that feels very Han Solo to me. Like the DL-44 blaster is so iconic.
Right.
And I love that. Yeah, she'll pick up another weapon, but that's always her go-to. That's the tried and true. That's the one you always reach for first, right? And so I love that idea. And of course, you've got the lovable Nyx, played by D. Bradley Baker, on the screen too, which is a whole nother component of gameplay, which I think is going to be really interesting. We've seen in some other ones with like a BD-1 in Jedi Fallen Order, hey, go help me with these tasks. We've seen some of this with I think the Battlefront games as well, but or with the latest one, at least with the Inferno Squad. But this is a whole different dynamic, I think, of being able to send Nyx to do and have kind of his own personality, but also be able to help you accomplish missions, figure out puzzles, and so on.
Yeah, Nyx is a very interesting character. I like the design. It's unique. You can kind of see we got him on the screen here from the trailer. It looks like a mix between like a axolotl and a tuku cat or loth cat of some sort. But this is a Mercal or Mercal, I think is the name for the
Mercal,
species.
right.
Yep. And they were kind of like beating around the bush about it being like a mysterious background, unknown planet. I think there might be something there. I hate to read too much into it, but I just don't understand why they wouldn't say, "Hey, this is why even bring that up? Why mention that his background is where his planet is or origin is mysterious in some way, right?" I don't know. I'm gonna go with Force Sensitive because that's my go-to. But you never you never know if they. I'm kidding, sort of. But it does look like D. Bradley Baker. They're gonna sell a billion toys with this thing already. I can tell you, it's super cute. I don't know what else to say other than that component, right? The relationship that they had. They mentioned that these two characters have been together like almost their entire life. Nyx is an extension of Kay Vess. We got to see in the gameplay where I think there were a couple of options on there where you could attack, you can push buttons, fetch items. That was a neat aspect where you can kind of send it to go retrieve a weapon and suddenly you have that weapon. That's kind of new there. So it does look like it's going to play into it a lot.
Yeah, it gives you range as a character, as a player, to where you're not confined to your space, that you have flexibility to be able to accomplish different things. So I like that's an element of the gameplay that they're bringing into it, because it opens up your options to you to just, especially this idea of being able to escape, I think is another important element of that too. And I think Nyx is a part of that element too, of being able to say, okay, I've got myself into a really bad jam. I should be able to run, and Nyx as a component to be able to help you get out of some of those spaces too. So I like that element that you can always there's always the option to just turn and get out of there.
Yeah. Yep. And let's talk about ND5, which is the BX battle droid. You can kind of see him here. And of course, he's on the main cover as well with the big, I guess that's a gun on his back. I've seen a couple of people that have already compared that to other animes, and I'm not familiar with them, honestly, so I'm not going to even try to speak to it. It sounds like they were kind of inspired for that artwork there. But he's wearing a trench coat of some sort. I don't know. He's cold. It's unusual. Have you ever had droids wear clothing before?
This kind of fits in with the Mandalorian episode. It's like a droid noir.
Besides Grievous. Besides Grievous.
It kind of looks like a noir type of look. He's like almost like a PI type of thing. I actually love this character. Just from the few lines we've got, I'm actually in love with this character. I love the design of the commando droids.
Yeah.
But that he's got this attitude, and he's kind of like looking out for her a little bit at the same time. I really like this character. I hope it's a character we get to play, although doesn't sound likely. Sounds like it'll be largely Kay Vess, but I like it. I love the dynamic that we've already got formulating here, even though very early on in what we know for it. But I like the idea of it.
And they haven't really mentioned exactly how ND5 plays into any of this, so I don't know if it's going to be, do you get to play as him like you said? Is it you and Nyx? Does he become a third companion of sorts? Yeah, I don't understand the dynamic here. It would be kind of a miss, in my opinion, if you didn't get to play as him, because I think that would open up a whole nother level of just different options and things you can do, right? It's probably more of the opposite of Kay. It's mostly shooting stuff and, the tactical aggressiveness of a character than what we get with Kay. So we'll see. I think they'll probably mention this here as we get closer to that.
Is that common in open world games where you play as different characters depending on what you're trying to accomplish, or is it largely you're this character and that's kind of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's largely your character. They haven't. This would be kind of. I don't want to say it's a first, but it's just not a common thing. They're even back in the older games though. A lot of single player games will let you swap out characters, and that's always a big surprise. Because, and to be clear, it doesn't sound like you really meet up with ND5 in this game until you're offered that massive heist job by Jalen, and that's from the developers. They said that at some point he serves as an enforcer droid in the underworld, but then he partners with Kay for the big high risk job that they've got planned here as part of that kind of ultimate goal in the game. So,
gotcha.
We'll see. I don't know exactly how he's going to play into it, but it would be pretty exciting if we got to actually play as him and again be given different options and different abilities through him. So Jalen, that's I was going to go and find that character. I can't remember. He was in the trailer. Was that towards the middle or the end? I forget now. But yeah, he did look a lot like Gal Katarn, which I don't know if that was the intent. I would think it probably wasn't, but it's hard to not look at him and see the same thing there.
It's such an iconic character, and it's a character that people really enjoyed from the, again, this is from the, what was the Jedi Knight series, right? Dark
Mm-hmm.
Forces, when he was interested by the original kind of Lucas games or Lucasfilm games or whatever they were called back then. And so it's such a lovable character, and there was such a great story with a lot of it. The thing with Kyle Katarn, though, even if you have the character in body and in name, the story is going to be quite different. So it's not going to be the same one you have, because there's so many elements that Kyle Katarn did in the Legends that do not work now in the new canon. Yeah, I think he helped steal the plans for the Death Star, for example, right?
Right.
So there's elements of that, but I love the design of the character. I mean, for Kanan looked a lot like this character too, from that design element. With a bit of he had more of a pauldron, or is this a little bit of a cape or whatever it is that's over his shoulder, but you still get this bad boy kind of look too, but it's always the buyer, right? The client, if you will, the one that's got the job for you, being able to do it, and they sweet talk you. And I wish I could figure out who the actor is for this, because the voice sounds so familiar and I cannot place it, but I just know the voice, and it's really eating at me, because I love the voice that of who they got for this, but it's not published anywhere quite yet. They're not announcing it. There you go. And he's right next to our new buddy ND5 here.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear Indy, and I think Indy, like Indiana Jones. I don't know if there's anything related there. Maybe I'm just on a Indy hype right now, but
right.
Yeah, we'll see.
I mean, you could not hit the design of this character any more on the nose with Kyle Katarn, though. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right, so, and we don't have a lot to go on right now with him. Again, he's probably a character that will get fleshed out, or at least be given. We'll probably get more hints and background on his character as time progresses and stuff gets out. Right. Jeff's saying 100% it's related to Indy 5. So there you go. Indy 5. Yeah, I can see it.
Got it.
Let's see. There was a mysterious character. This could be anybody. Let's see if I can find them with any kind of reasonable amount of time without really just draining and rambling on. But there's one point in this trailer where they kind of show somebody standing there on the side of, I don't know.
I thought it was right after this scene.
It might have been. They looked like they were standing over in Canto Bight, just from the way the design of the architecture of the buildings were. Right. And I wondered if that was going to be some kind of there he is right there, this guy.
Yeah.
That's not Jalen. I mean,
No, it's not Jalen. This guy's definitely having a bad day, though. But yeah, this actually does look like Canto Bight. You have some of the similar designs. It looks like it's in the similar, coastline that we saw in Last Jedi. So I kind of like the idea of going back there, that Canto Bight is kind of the seed of greed and of, oh gosh, just opulence. And it's the criminal I mean, there's so many people, they're just, the way they get their money is just completely, subject to, not great actions and whatnot. So I like this idea, but yeah, who is this character? And does definitely look menacing, and he's got a fantastic beard, so I'm all in.
Well, I was wondering how soon it would be before you mentioned the beard. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like he could, this is the leader of the Ashiga clan or something, right? It sounds like, it looks like he could be, he's got a fur coat on of sorts, so not Imperial. It doesn't look anything like Imperial. But I could see him as, a very wealthy kind of, maybe the Ashiga clan is home base is in Canto Bight, where all the money is and the opportunity is to exploit these very rich and wealthy, 1%ers or 0.01%ers of the galaxy. Maybe that's him. So we'll see. It was interesting. He stood out to me because he looks like a character from like a Final Fantasy game more than anything else. So right. Yeah, it does look menacing in some way. And then lastly, I guess for the character, just to kind of round things out, the Trailblazer, which, it's okay. I was kind of disappointed maybe a little bit in the ship design, especially it broke my heart when one of the developers was talking about like how it's every developer's dream to make a Star Wars game, but then it's every developer's further dream to actually design a Star Wars ship. And as I try to pull the ship up, it's just, I guess it's okay. It just looks like a big block more than anything else. And I hate to poo-poo on it because I don't want it to. Here it is, that one. It looks Star Wars-y enough. I'm not saying it doesn't look like Star Wars, but it doesn't look like there's a whole lot here to it. Maybe there's more. Maybe you'll be able to customize it.
Kid.
Yeah, right. She may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts.
It's a freighter. And again, it makes sense, though, when you think about a smuggler or, someone who's trying to live life and smuggle goods and make a living and do that type of thing. It's functional, right? I think that's the element of it that I think is okay. Is it nondescript? Yeah, but I think that's kind of a good thing. I do like the engine design, the way that the engines kind of pull apart when they're going to do hyperdrive and things like that. So there's elements of this I think they're kind of cool and that work pretty well. And again, it's functional in that regard. So I'm glad that it's not too flashy. Is it the Outrider or something like that, or a YT, or would those have been cool? Yeah, but those would have they been a little bit more on the nose if it would have been something with a lot of really familiar design elements. And again, we're trying to make the story and this environment a bit more catered to the character. So I would love to see that we would be able to modify the ship over time. I don't know if they've not said anything like that, of course. Those are expectations of the game, but I like that idea though of being able to again make things your own. We saw this with Jedi Fallen Order, or I'm not sorry, but with the Jedi Survivor, right? The customization has just people have just gone crazy, and they absolutely love it, right? They love that flexibility of being able to make character not only look like them, but feel like they have invested in that character, maybe financially in some ways, I guess, but just to make the characters feel like this. And I like the idea of doing that with ships too, because they're so important to Star Wars.
Yeah.
And they're as much a part of the character as the character. And like you said, sometimes the ships do feel like their own set of characters.
Yep. Well, let's see. So as far as the locations go, and I'll go back because I think the best shot that we got of all of those different locations was in the extended gameplay trailer. But as I'm pulling that up, some of the ones that were kind of announced, I mean, we saw Tatooine. Akiva is another one from the, what was that? It was the Aftermath trilogy, I believe. They had brought that planet up at one point. But it sounds like at least a lot of this, and certainly what we saw from the gameplay starts on this Tushara kind of small moon planet thing, or it's a small moon. I loved everything about what they were talking about. It sounds like they worked with Lucasfilm on coming up with vegetation, its own culture, the history, the people, right? That's what you would expect Lucasfilm to kind of provide to the game that you want, fill in all those holes, give it depth, give it the dimensions that you want so that you've got that history there, right? All that just kind of it builds on the storytelling aspects and allows the creators to kind of, have a focus there. So all of that stuff was great. I love the way it looked. There's just quickly on the additional planets, because we're running out of time, but Coruscant, somebody mentioned Kijimi. That was definitely at the very end as well. And then, I don't know, I mean, we talked about Canto Bight. I would expect to go to Coruscant as well in some point. It feels like that one, why would they leave that one out? He said there were some surprises. One of the developers said there would be some surprises in terms of the planets that we would see. But yeah, what did you think of, I guess, are there any planets that you're looking forward to seeing that you haven't seen already? Or any that caught your eye in this trailer here that we're looking at?
Well, I mean, Tashara caught my eye, and I actually had a lot of questions around that too, because they said they spent a lot of time, they designed it, they had Lucasfilm there with them. But if it's all, I'm presuming we would go back, because if what we saw is at the very beginning of the game, and that's kind of the first arc, if you will, just to kind of get you off the planet to escape, then it kind of seems like they invested a lot for not a lot of time there. So I would presume we might go back there and it becomes maybe a bit of a hub for us. I love the design elements, though. You get more of the barren landscape, but you still have elements of vegetation and rocky outcropping. It's very dynamic. I love the color palette that they picked. I also really dig this. This kind of reminds me of like the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. What was the planet they were on there?
The killer music. Yeah.
Yeah, drawing a blank on me. But I mean, there's so many of those types of planets that we can pull from and visit that are familiar locales that, you don't necessarily have to make any big to-do about, and I think Coruscant is a great place, especially the sub-levels, right? The lower levels of Coruscant make sense to make an appearance in, even though you're going into the heart of the Empire. That's a bit of a dangerous mission. So there's opportunity there to explore some of those familiar worlds, but also introduce a lot of other ones that we haven't seen. I would love to see some surprises like Malachor or something like that, but maybe for resources or something crazy. But they could take a lot of things. But we have like an Imperial facility here in what you're showing here, where she's attacking the stormtroopers. So clearly we're not just bound to just planets. We're talking about installations too for the Empire.
Yep. Let's see. On the gameplay front, I think we've kind of touched on some of this already. The gameplay it sounds like she was like the first mission. I'm assuming that was the first mission that we saw in the gameplay, where she was hired to go steal something from the Pikes, and there's the Mon Calamari, Miss Akbar, or whatever, I don't know what her name was, that had hired her. It looks like that's one of the first missions you get, and through that, she had an opportunity there at the very end to kind of side with the Empire. In the gameplay, she chose not to. That's what threw up the big wanted sign, like you'd mentioned earlier. And it sounds like, and I'm the kind of person that I will run that to the red. Like, I will do whatever I can to get as much notoriety to get the Empire after me, just to see if I can get away with it. It sounds like it's not impossible, but it was very frowned upon by the developers. Like, this is not what you want to spend your time on unless you just got a lot of it and really don't care. But it sounds like you can have the Empire coming at you from all different angles and really rack up that reputation.
I like the idea, though, that there's consequences, right? So if you're going to do that, there are consequences, and you might not really like the consequence. If you want to really truly play the role of scoundrel and smuggler and things like that, you want to fly under the radar of the Empire, but sometimes you can't help but attract attention. So there's a scale, and there's ways that you can increase and reduce some of that to take some of the heat off of you as well. So I like that that's an element. And of course, I think what they were maybe just trying to get across, though, is that you definitely, to play the role and to really live this lifestyle, you want to go below the radar. You don't want to cause too much strife for the Empire to draw attention, because they will make your life very, very difficult, if you're not careful and if you really do push it too far.
Yeah. But yeah, we talked about, so stealth, melee, they've got range combat. Looks like there's some ship combat that happens there at the very end of the trailer.
Right.
Doesn't look, it looks pretty much what you would expect from a Star Wars game. We'll see. I don't know how intricate it's going to get.
What do you make of their comments around taking your ship from surface of the planet to space? I was trying to understand why that was important to them.
Well, so that's one of the beauties of like a open world game. The idea that you're never having to really wait for load times. And so this is a first for Star Wars games. Every game that I can think of, you've never been able to go from land to a ship, take off, exit the atmosphere, then, fly in space, then shoot into hyperspace, come out on the other side of hyperspace, and it never loads, right? Even like the MMOs, and I'll just go to SWTOR here, like just to get from the surface to your ship or the surface to a space station or whatever, to get to actually be able to go out into hyperspace, there's a load time. And so be able to seamlessly do that, right? It's part of that immersion, like we talked about. There's no load time, so you're immersed in the reality of, if I get in my ship right now, I can just take off and go, and I can come back, and everything is still present. Everything is still persistent. Everything is exactly the way that I left it, right? That's the beauty of these open world games. And so this is a first for Star Wars. We've never had this ability. Now, did it take a little bit of time? I think so, but I think that's part of it. It would be interesting if you can actually do something in that time. Like, for example, can you have a space battle, right? Can you get the attention of ships and have like a dogfight on the way out of space? I think that would be exciting, rather than just, once you get to a point, and I won't play it because there's about probably, and it's not long, it's maybe 8 seconds, I think, total. It was the time that it took for you to actually get into space in the trailer here, in the gameplay trailer. But, there's nothing going on there. And in this part, it probably didn't make a difference, but I'm showing it right now, right? If there was an opportunity to actually do something during this time, that would be pretty cool. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but as you can see,
it's actually loading in the background. Yeah. In the top left.
Right. There's a little thing that's spinning there. So, but it gives you that immersion, like you're actually getting out there, and then when it finally finishes, you're out in space, and now it turns into the next type of world there. There it goes.
It's really cool. I did like how they handled I love the little graphics thing, destroy our orbit. I love the font, the choices they picked, and just the design elements that go along with it. But something else I liked, when you go into hyperspace, if something got in your way, it interfered with the computing of what it was able to figure out. So you have to make an adjustment in order to get back and recalibrate. Mm-hmm. So I kind of like that element there. And I know that's probably easy to navigate, easy to get around, but it was a nice element that says, no, that really happens. If you don't want to fly through a star or anything else, because that makes your day real sour real fast. So I like the element that you do have to have a clear path, and you really do need, even if you want to make an escape, you can't just punch it and go. You still have to calibrate. You still got to get the computations have to be made in order to make the jump to hyperspace.
There was one other thing here from the gameplay I just want to kind of pick your brain on. When she was on that speeder bike, it looked like there was a way to kind of queue up some things. I called it bullet time.
Yeah,
so that's really not fair.
Yeah, so she was able to pull her blaster and shoot while she was on the speeder, which again isn't necessarily anything new, but being able to aim and things like that. So it was able to slow it down so that you were actually able to manage what you're trying to do. That again makes her feel like you have control over that environment, handle the things, and also the capability of your character. So yeah, it's a little bit further on from the scene here.
Yeah, I was just showing the gun down here in the left-hand corner. It looks like it's charging up, so she can't use it just yet. You see that?
Yeah.
And then once it's there.
Yeah, then she's able to actually trigger the ability and then take out the ships and point and aim. And again, you're like you said, it does slow it down, so you're able to actually do this, because doing this in real time would probably be quite challenging to have any kind of effects
Right.
on it. And then you see the effects of it once the action is complete. But again, it highlights the ability of your character while making it accessible and making it not so difficult. Now, I had another reaction to the scene, though, was, okay, is it going to be too easy to do some of this stuff? But I like that there are things in place that are managing how often you can do this. It's almost like a cooldown type of timer, right? And a recharge period. So those are important things to balance those mechanics.
Yep. And we're not gonna. I don't want to run the gameplay too much because I don't want to get flagged for stuff. It's just such a pain in the rear end. So I'm trying to just throw bits and pieces of it without it playing. So I didn't really want to make it part of the discussion tonight. But I just felt like it'd help with some of the visuals and stuff. And we didn't even talk about some of the bars and things that load here. I mean, all this is we're gonna get so much more detail here as time goes on. I'll stop the share there. I guess the big question is when. Like, this is 2024. I'm looking at this, and to me, this feels very polished. It seems like they've got the core system in place. They've got the storyline. I mean, it sounds like they're, at the time of the behind the scenes thing, they were still filming some footage. I'd imagine that was probably months ago. I wouldn't expect that to have been very recently. But when I see based on my own experience and what I'm seeing here, I would expect this game not to be, I mean, what are we, June right now?
Yeah.
And they're saying 2024, like a Q1 doesn't seem out of reach to me. I think that's probably anything more. I think maybe that's the aggressiveness of it all, right? If they went with a Q2 release, that's probably the latest I would expect this game. But I can't see this game going into Q3, Q4, 2024. That unless they go into really development hell of some sort. But I don't see that happening.
Yeah, seeing this level of polish, and again, this is early on in the game, so it doesn't necessarily give you any indication of how much of the game is actually done at this point. But it's very encouraging to see this in like a spring release of 2024. And if I don't know if Hardcounter's still in the chat, but he's usually got a pretty good feel of kind of this development cycles with games. So maybe he has a bit of a say in there, a bit of an idea. But I'm with you though. I think this game, if it's more than a year out from now, that seems pretty far. I mean, it feels like if it was anything after summertime next year, it feels like they probably ran into an issue with it. But or maybe when they started actually doing like more public testing of some of this stuff. So I'm not sure where they're at with alpha. Definitely probably not in a beta at this point. But again, they're going to run it through all the traps though, and make sure that they do get good eyes on it to make sure they do release a quality game. But I'm with you. I'm thinking this is looking like a spring. I'm also not sure what the ideal time to release games is, because I don't follow games overly closely. But if there's a sweet spot for when gaming season truly is, but I'm kind of with you. I'm thinking probably late spring, something like that.
Yeah. That would be great. And it would still come out before Star Wars Bounty Hunters. So, yeah, you got that going for you.
I can't even. Star Wars Hunters, it's just a game that they just need to shelve it, I guess, at this point, but we'll see.
It's actually in beta right now, an alpha that's been released in other countries but the U.S. I don't know why.
You know what other company is constantly in beta? Google.
That's true. That's very true.
This comes from a very heavy Google user.
But I'm excited, man. This was a surprise. We knew this game. Well, I should say it was a surprise of sorts. We knew they were working on an open world game. At least that was the prevailing rumor. Great to see it finally officially confirmed. And I don't know anybody that looked at this and said, wow, this is going to be terrible. I think it pretty much garnered the attention and the excitement from just about every sect of the family in terms of Star Wars fandoms out there. I try to keep close contact with a lot of those, or at least a pulse on them, and everyone seems genuinely excited about it. So I think it's going to be a pretty big game if they can, pull this off and get it out in time and everything works the way they're expecting to. I'm excited about it.
It shows you that the interest and the demand for Star Wars games is still there when they do it right. And I think this is where Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor has really, really got Star Wars fans back on board with what gaming and Star Wars can really be. And I know we've had good examples of this in the past, but those games have really taken it to a new level, especially with how well they've been received. So I think now our expectations have been, peaked, and they've risen as a result. But at the same time, it's given us more faith and interest that there's a market that can make these games profitable and make them successful. Pardon me, and things that we can actually carry forward and do well. So really encouraging.
Yeah, and I would say this too. Just lastly, that Ubisoft Connect or Forward, I watched most of it. And most of the games, they all look pretty good. I mean, they're so good at these graphics these days. I sound like an old curmudgeon now. But the other one so to your point, I'm coming back to what you said. The other game that really stood out for me was the Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. Like, that game looked great, and I won't get into the details of it. Go look it up or go watch the gameplay and all that. But between those two games, those were the games that people were like cheering for. And of course, they left Star Wars Outlaws for the very, very end of it. So this was kind of their flagship, their big hurrah, the big surprise ending of the show. They opened up with Avatar and they closed with this one. So their biggest two games coming out. But yeah, to your point, when they showed this logo, I mean, it was like it wasn't a standing ovation, but I mean, there was, and of course, everybody there was mostly developers, right? People that they are probably close and big Ubisoft fans. So I'm not taking anything away from that. But genuinely, this was the one that they were really hollering and hooping for because, like you said, Star Wars games mean something. They have a massive role in the history of video games, and it's something that we look forward to as I think, and as an industry, and certainly as a collective group of fans of Star Wars. We kind of need this as much as we need movies. We can't ever get away from it. So they put their best foot forward here. It looks like so.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll end the show there. You got some shout outs. I know there was a bazillion people in the chat tonight, so thank you guys for coming out.
Yeah, thanks everyone in the chat. Again, if you're listening to this, cantinacast.com/YouTube, if you'd like to come join us and be like one of these amazing people. Risk, Rod, Gary, Jonathan, Steph, Reader Reborn, Rob, Sky, Dale, Jeff, Lauren, and Hard Countered. Everyone in the background, thank you for coming out tonight. We hope to see you and hope you'll join the chat in the future over on the YouTubes. And again, right after this, we're basically going to go right into our Patreon episode where we do a little show and tell with our Tatooine trading post. We get to share what we've accumulated over the last week or two and just things that we're excited about, things that we find fun and interesting. There's an exclusive link in your Patreon feed if you're at the This Is The Way tier and above. So if you are at a different tier, I invite you to go take a look at that. You could be like Dale and Z, who upgrade and join those tiers recently. So thank you to everybody who has done that, and we hope you're enjoying the content. We will see you in a few minutes.
Yes, and I don't have the credits updated, but I will do that this weekend. So hopefully this Sunday when our Patreon Spotlight and the Way Station, which will be our next show Sunday night starting at 9 p.m., I'll have the credits updated for then. So again, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you guys in just a few minutes for the Tatooine Trading Post.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.